For the first project of my new shop, I'm going to be building a miter saw station. The first step is to build the shelving. So I'll be cutting down a few 2x4s to length and then lay them out on the floor. I'll be using these 4 smaller blocks of wood, kind of as spacers, so that I can get the shelving as level as possible on the floor. I'm going to do my best to show every step that you'll need to see to build this yourself. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, either email or in the comment section here, or even my Instagram page. I'm also going to be making some plans that I'll post to this video once it's done. Once I make sure that the sides are parallel with one another, I can pre-drill some holes and drive in some screws. Then I can lay down some joists, and using those little blocks in the corners, I can move them along and make sure that the joists are flush with the top of the front and back faces. I did 2 screws on each 2x4, front and back. And with that, the first shelf is done. And then here's a little time lapse of me building the next one so you can kind of see every little step. And I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on time lapses and music and everything. I'm never sure what exactly people like to see that are watching my videos, so if you wouldn't mind leaving me a comment and just letting me know if you appreciate when I do this fast sped up motion, or if you like it when it's just slow cut scenes and I'm narrating, if you like music, whatever. I'd really appreciate the information. And even if it's just to tell me you wish that I'd shut up, feedback is always appreciated. And now that the second shelf is done, I can put both of these together. And now I'll cut some 2x4s that will attach both the shelves together and also act as feet. Here what I'm doing is laying the 2x4s down and marking the height that I want the shelving to be at. And I'm not clumsy at all, I swear. For the rest of this project, you'll see me using these clamps. They came in such handy. The wide mouth made it very easy to clamp pieces together temporarily as I move things around. Doing this solo can always be kind of a challenge. So huge shout out to these Jorgensen clamps. Not sponsored by any means, but man, did they save me a lot of time and headache. And now that the shelving is in the correct height, I can drive in a few screws. And I cut out a ton of screw video footage. I figured once you see one screw going in, that's probably all you need to see per location. But I put anywhere from 3 to 5 screws in each of these positions. And you can kind of see here how the front leg, it doesn't rise up. So they're not like these riser posts like the back two. And the reason for that is for the miter saw top itself, I want to be able to lay boards down. And if I had a post going all the way up in the front, that would inhibit me putting a longer piece on the tabletop. I'm using those Jorgensen clamps here as attachment points so that I can lay the top shelving on solo without it falling down. So use this as an example to remember to always wear your PPE, especially if you're clumsy like me. Sometimes safety squints just don't quite cut it. So now I can make sure that all the posts are parallel with one another, the top is level, and I can screw everything together, and I can move everything to the side to prepare for the actual miter saw top itself. And as you can see here, it's getting a little bit warm in my shop. I don't have any ventilation, there's no windows, and there's only that door in the back, but it's even hotter outside, so I need to figure out a good setup here. You know, they try to warn you about the Houston heat and humidity, but you really don't know what it's like until you experience it. This next step is to actually build the shelf that the miter saw itself will sit on. This will be a fairly small shelf, so it's fairly fast to assemble. And now you can see here how it's recessed slightly below the other shelf. This is so that the surface of the miter saw is flush with the top of the lower shelf on the station. This piece of plywood will sit below the miter saw. Using a 4-foot level as a straight edge, I can cut that down to size. Now I can put that shelf in place, bring over the miter saw, and test it for fit. And unfortunately, I forgot to take into account the width of 2x4s again. This seems to be a very common occurrence. So I'll have to make some adjustments coming up here, but first I want to move the station into place. Working alone, you have to get a little bit creative at times. So here I'm using a 2x4 on top of a furniture dolly to move the miter saw station into its more permanent location. And I can arrange some of the plywood I have in my shop out of the way so I can push the station back to the wall. Now I'm redoing some of those steps to make room for the miter saw. At each step, I'm making sure that all sides are parallel that should be parallel, or perpendicular when they should be perpendicular. So as time goes on, you'll notice that I'm getting more and more sweaty, and you can probably hear the fan going. And I also eventually opened the door, so I know the audio quality of the video itself might not be the best, but I need to work on a better solution. So here I'm using a beam to hold the shelf that the miter saw will be on level. And then I can adjust everything accordingly using my 4-foot level. These pieces will create a 45-degree angle so that I can swivel the miter saw without any obstruction. And with that 45-degree angled piece in place, I no longer need the straight edge on the front, so I can use a skill saw and cut off the excess. Installing the same 45-degree angle on the other side and a temporary post. Now I can remove the front face plate and replace it with a longer piece. Try saying that 5 times really fast. These short blocks will act as sistering joists so that I can match either side of the upper shelving to one another. Quickly screw together the right-hand side of the lower shelving. And using those clamps again, I can make sure that everything is level with one another and equidistant. And with that installed, I can remove that temporary support beam and put the miter saw back on and test it for fit. And thankfully this time it fit with plenty of clearance. And using the miter saw in what will become its final location on the shelf. Now I'm just finishing up the rest of the station sides. After I'm done finishing up the rest of the sides on this miter saw station, I can work on the rest of the upper shelving. And this is where those clamps paid for themselves. You can see in the background there I have the door open and the fan going, but man is it hot. Trimming off a bit of excess using my circular saw. With everything screwed together and solid, I can finally move the station into its final place. Once it's in position, I can finally start leveling out all of the legs. I took a couple pieces of scrap 2x4 and I cut little wedges. This is all very roughly done, going anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch on one side down to 0 to create those little tiny triangles. This whole process took me about an hour to get perfect, so I just went leg by leg, checking that level and driving in those shims. I'm installing a few more 2x4s as support for the shelving that will rest on top of it. Because of these posts, it just made more sense to do multiple section and shelving instead of a full sheet. Now I'm cutting the plywood that will become the shelving top to its rough size. And then put it in position, marking out where those posts are directly onto the shelving top. And I can carry the lines down and then cut everything using my circular saw and my jigsaw. And I'm carefully making sure that I'm getting all the dimensions correctly because I don't want to have to redo this. This becomes a complicated step. Plus, if you make mistakes on a piece this size, you're likely to have to use a new piece. After I'm done with the jigsaw and the circular saw, I can put the piece in place. Here I'm wondering why it slid into place so easy. And again, I forgot to take into account the width of 2x4s. So that 1.5 inch on each side did not get taken into account. So I need to go back and redo it. Luckily, this piece is bigger than the right-hand side, so I can just use this again. And also, I can use this as a template to trace out the original pattern onto a new piece of plywood. So correcting my mistake fortunately didn't cost me much time or money. That's much better. Here I'm just using the left-hand sided piece that I made the mistake on and trimming up the sides so that I can mark it up for the right-hand side. The process is the same over here. I just originally put it on top of the shelving where it's going to go in location and marked out where those posts are and then cut them to size. Luckily for this side, I didn't make any mistakes. Practice makes perfect. Now I need to cut those smaller pieces that will become the edges on either end of the miter saw. After putting it into place, I can put some weights on top of it and mark out the underside so that I can have a flush surface with the 2x4 framing. The process is then repeated on the other side, marking everything out from beneath and then using my jigsaw to trace out the pattern that I created. With this piece of plywood cut and installed, the lower portion of the shelving is now complete. And now you can see here how everything lines up flush with one another. Here I'm cutting a few pieces at 45 degrees that'll become bracing along several of the corners on the miter saw station. This will reduce any sort of racking or motion created when I'm using it. I would install one of these bracing members on a corner and another on the 90-degree adjacent corner. The final step for this project is to cut down the upper shelving tops. I'm using thinner plywood up here because I do not expect to be using this shelving that often. It's mainly just going to be for storage. So after ripping those pieces down, I can throw them up top, make sure that everything lines up, and then throw a few screws in there to lock everything into place. Continuing on with the left-hand side, screw that into place, and everything is now officially done. Alright, I want to thank you guys for watching this video. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can leave a comment, send me a note, or reach out to me on Instagram. I hope that you guys are doing well, and I'll see you in the next video.